for your time. All right, Bolu, let's start off with Mali's, the junta's reason for the immediate withdrawal. They made reference to the fact that ECOWAS actually placed sanctions on them, and for that reason, ECOWAS, as the first, responder right now, broke the terms or text of the treaty. And for that reason, they are sort of reciprocated. So, looking at this context, would you say that to some extent, maybe Mali or the military junta there might have had a reason, a justifiable reason for their action?
Okay, even though treaties are non-binding, it's just a moral obligation for countries to abide by them. They had a process when they were joining ECOWAS, and they must follow due process when they are leaving as well, because it's very important. It's like, imagine now UK leaving EU and they're saying, okay, they're leaving EU and they didn't follow the due process, have negotiations or not. It's important for them to understand that they cannot exist in silos. The alliance of Sahelian states cannot just be on their own and think they can do whatever. They still need to be on good terms with their neighbors. They still need to be on good terms with their bloc, because their citizens will want to travel, they want to have to trade between countries. We need each other. We are dependent.
But would you want to say that to some extent, or to any extent at all, really matters, given the fact that since the power grab, there's been sanctions placed already, that's by ECOWAS on Mali?
The sanctions have been placed, and we see that happening, all over the world, to countries that are part of certain groups. The most important thing is the intention for these things being done. I think one reason that they gave was the closure of the borders and all. But I think any reasonable country that does not want a war or a crisis to spill over to their own country, they can act independently and close their borders. Even Nigeria, there was at times we close our borders to Benin Republic, even when there's in a time of peace. For economic reasons, the country can close borders anytime. So the fact that there's been sanctions in some way, it has to be commensurate in a way, and leaving aggressively from a bloc doesn't sound like a commensurate or wise move.
Now, let's consider the, of course, likely implications, of this withdrawal, not just, on ECOWAS, if at all, this time around, but more importantly, on Mali and its citizens, particularly the business community.
They will still want to trade with the bloc in some way, and when that cannot happen, it will stress this AES states in some way, especially the citizens are the ones that will suffer, which is quite unfortunate. But over time, they'll realize that they can't just exist on their own that way, and they will need to be on good terms with the bloc. And military governments are very volatile. The person there today might not be there tomorrow. And the three leaders are in coherence right now. Somebody else may come in tomorrow that does not even align with any of the agenda of the AES state and says he wants to go back to ECOWAS. So they really must sit down and ensure that they're not putting their people in jeopardy.
Now, of course, let's talk about, the future of, ECOWAS right now. Do you think that this particular action by Mali and, of course, the juntas that did same, do you think in any way it waters down the importance and also the influence of ECOWAS?
It's quite embarrassing when countries stand up to ECOWAS, and I think ECOWAS, at times they might be a bit too hasty, and they act before going by the rules or checking the articles and treaties sometimes. I don't know why that is happening, because I believe that the experts and policy analysts right there in ECOWAS. So there's been some embarrassing moves, and the best way is to rectify. It's okay to circle back. And I've recommended, on air that ECOWAS should try and, negotiate with the leaders and call for elections, like we saw in Egypt, as Al-Sisi was a military leader, called for elections, and is now a democratic president who seems to be doing fairly. The most important thing is that we have democracy in the country, in the continent, irrespective of wherever it's there. Power must belong to the people, and it's not by sanctioning countries.
I mean, do you think this recent unfolding of events should prompt ECOWAS as an organization to review some of its treaties, its past laws, its constitutions to sort of suit the current reality?
Yeah, treaties are meant to be living documents or living agreements. For example, if we look at climate change, we had the Paris Agreement, and we've seen improvements on that in different conventions over time. That's what should happen in ECOWAS. It has to reflect the realities of the time politically. I don't think that's happening right now. They need to reevaluate their rules of engagement and ensure as much as possible they're not deviating from the principles for which ECOWAS was founded itself.
Let's move away this time around from Mali. Let's look at Senegal too. And of course, a pivotal factor here is also ECOWAS having to some sort of warn the government of Senegal, not warn per se, but caution them, as regards the recent development there. We saw protests break out after the president did announce the postponement of general elections. And ECOWAS is saying in the interest of democracy, the government might want to tread softly. I mean, I would like to know your take on that.
Yeah, I've seen the document or the communique that the ECOWAS released, and I think it's very important for ECOWAS to be kind of mindful of the wording of their communication sometime, and not to be too hardline when dealing with countries that are voluntarily in the bloc. ECOWAS must stop telling countries what to do and respect the territorial integrity of countries, because we're saying that, okay, ECOWAS, that Senegal should go back to their calendar. I think a better approach was for ECOWAS to tell Senegal to do everything within their constitutional power to ensure that there's constitutional order in the country, not expressly telling Senegal to go back to their calendar.
I mean, don't you think some sort of, sorry to use this diplomatic term, a bit of turn for satire, is required, given the fact that we are beginning to see, juntas break out in quite a number of African states, and people are beginning to ask, so what's the relevance of these regional blocs? Like the ECOWAS, for instance, if they cannot to some extent enforce, but just in 30 seconds.
Yeah, because it's a voluntary organization, and treaties are non-binding. It's just for countries to come together and work towards goal. But I think it would be better if ECOWAS, admonish and try to be diplomatic as much as possible and tell, the document their communication should tell what they've done. All right. Okay. Admonish the Senegal leaders to kind of tone down their rhetoric or ensure that there's constitutional order, not especially instructing them on what to do in their countries.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Michael-Biyi, for, of course, your contribution on the news. Once again, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Now, a group of Senegalese opposition politicians and their representatives